Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Daniel, chapter 10. We are now in verse 8. By way of review, I trust that we are all familiar that yesterday we talked about Daniel by the banks of the great river Tigris. He was there and he had a vision. Please understand that a vision is not something that is literal, but it's something that is in the mind. It is something to do with the period between wake and asleep. In that period of time, God spoke, and there is divine communication that seems to happen in that state of mind, I would call it the state of mind. Obviously, when you're fully asleep, then we have the state of dreams. And so, vision is a state that is not awake, but not asleep. And so, he is there by the banks and he happened to come into that state. The people around him did not see, but we read in verse before that they felt something that is really terrifying and they ran away. And Daniel persisted and he's there, he's looking at this, and he is seeing a man dressed in white, and he has a golden belt of fine gold. His face was like lightning, brilliant, and his eyes were like flaming torch. It is a vision that is not normal. And so bear in mind whenever we talk about vision, anything can happen in a vision. These are not what we call natural things. If it is natural, then we'll be looking at it. And so these people over here did not see anything because it is happening in the mind of Daniel. And so with that, we continue in verse 8. Verse 8 says, the word so is better translated as and then in our context. After they ran away to hide. Who ran away to hide? These people. The men who were with Daniel, who didn't see anything but felt the terrifying emotions. And so they didn't understand. And it's something really creepy to them, maybe. And they ran to hide. And so it says here, I was left alone. The idea of left alone, or it's better to say that he was left behind. I think that would be a better way of saying it. He was left alone, not wrong, but the text really means he was left behind. That these people ran away, and the only one that is remaining is Daniel. And so that is what it means. And then, this is the word, and then I saw this great vision. Remember, we're still talking about a vision. This is the vision. It is existing in the mind of Daniel. And the great vision literally means it's not great as big, it is great as the meaning itself, the things that you see, it is incredible. Now, obviously, in the Hebrew language, there's no word like we have called incredible. And that's the kind of language that we're talking about. Because great means it is fantastic, it is beyond expression. The result was, yet no strength was left in me. Now, the word strength literally means there's no uh, power, there's no, well, I guess strength is a good word. It is in a more literal form that he does not feel like standing up. There's no strength in his limbs. I think that would be a better way of saying. The second part here is the word for. is and my complexion turned to a deathly pallor. The complexion in me turned into destruction is really the word. Turn into ruin. Now, how does that come about? If you just imagine the complexion, when you are happy, your cheeks are rosy. When you are so scared and everything is giving you the creeps, when it is making you realize that what you're seeing is really beyond yourself. And that is what this means. Now, the translators like this deathly pallor. It is it is an interpretation. And so the complexion turned into ruin is like decay. The facial expression just became like death. The next part here says, and I retain no strength. Now, this idea here literally means he cannot hold up. I hold no strength. I cannot summon my strength. Now, when these are describing Daniel, then you realize that he is not in a good shape. He is not your bold Daniel. He's not the Daniel in the lion's den. And so this vision really took him by surprise and left in him such an impression that he is about to sink into the ground. Verse 9. Verse 9 says, but, of course, this would be your and then I heard the sound of his words. Now, his words would be the person that he saw in, I guess you can say, in verse 5. When you look at verse 5, his word is the man that he saw. And this man is what we call Gabriel. This is the same man in chapter 8, chapter 9, and now in chapter 10. And so the Jews think that this is Gabriel. Now, obviously, there is no name given except in chapter 9. And so it says his words, when you hear the sound of his words, and and then it says here, and as soon as I heard the sound of his words, basically we need to understand that these two are one and the same. You hear the sound of his words, you hear the sound of his words, and it says here, as soon as, while he hears it, the moment he heard it, it says here, and then, that is a missing and then here, and then, it is so terrifying that I fell into a deep sleep on my face with my face on the ground. Basically, he fell onto the ground, face to the ground, and it is like as if he, well, I guess you can say he kind of died there. So it says, into a deep sleep on my face. He fainted. I think you can say that. He was too weak to stand. This is a fainting spell. And he fell face down onto the ground. Now, he can still talk about this. And so he is not fully asleep, but he is in this semi conscious state that the vision is still active. The semi-conscious would be not awake, but not asleep. So he is aware. When the prophets receive communication from God, it is in this state and of semi-consciousness, and they actually remember every single word that God says, and that's why they can utter, "Thus said the Lord." And by that, they remember everything and can write it down. And so that is the state that Daniel is in. Now, in verse 10, and behold, a hand touched me and shook me on my hands and knees. Now, this word shook, although we can say it is quiver, it really is to cause to move. This is the word shook. And basically, what the imagery is trying to say is from this posture, Daniel is shaken to a posture like that. So his hands and his knees are on the ground. Verse 11. And then after that, he said to me, so this is the man. Now, obviously, what we have seen so far in chapter 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10 here is that we find that angels do appear in human form, and it's really called a man in this case, but they are in human form. They are not man, but they are appearing like a man. And he said to me, this is Daniel, not in the Babylonian name, but in the Hebrew name. It says here, Daniel, you who are treasured. This is a very important expression. It says, you who have desirable qualities. Desirable qualities means that he is someone that God sees as excellent, right? He's an excellent character. There are not many of these people around. And when we do encounter someone like this, in chapter 9, Daniel is called the beloved of God. And here he is called the desirable of God. You can also say that he is most most delighted, right? Most delightful. These are all from the view of God. So God is seeing Daniel in a very pleasurable, very desirable state. And the angel speaks like that to Daniel and says, understand the words that I'm about to tell you. Now, this word understand uh, literally means to try to have understanding. I think that is one way of seeing it. Think about it. Think through. Think through. Gain understanding. Now, why? Because as I mentioned yesterday, chapters 10, 11, and 12, three chapters, is one single vision. And he has to think through, contemplate the words that I am speaking to you. Now, this idea here that I'm about to tell you literally means I am speaking to you. It's not about to tell you. The words includes these words that he is saying. The next part here is and. Now this word and is and then. Now that I'm speaking to you, and then you must stand at your place, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. Notice he is in the state of semi conscious, and the angel said to him this: I have been sent to you. Been sent to you by who? By God. I is the angel, the man that he saw in verse 5. The next part here is, and when he had spoken. Now, this word, and after he spoke this word to me, after he finished speaking, you can say that, then I stood up trembling. So, this is good. I stood up trembling. So, what we find out in Daniel is that now he is standing up, but he is shaking, he is shivering. That would be what we are talking about. He is afraid. So we are looking at the actions. In the Hebrew language, when it defines the words, it is painting the picture. He was so afraid, had a fainting spell. Now he is told, stand up, you need to think this through and hear me carefully. And when he stood up, he is absolutely frightened. Verse 12. Then and then. So remember, we are now at the state where Daniel is standing up and he is looking at the angel Gabriel. And this is still in the vision, but it looks very real. It looks very real. He is afraid, and Daniel, being afraid, look at what the angel said. He said to me, he says, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding all this vision and to humble yourself before God. So notice this is and to humble. When did this start? For the 21 days, really. The 21 days of mourning. He didn't eat meat. He didn't eat good bread. He didn't drink wine. He was in mourning. It's not fasting, but he was in a way fasting for 21 days because he felt really bad that the temple of God had stopped in its construction. And in his prayer, your words were heard. And it says, and then I have come to your words. I have come to your words, meaning Gabriel is responding to his prayer, to Daniel's mourning. So he's not just mourning by crying and abstaining from good food. He is mourning by seeking God, asking what happened. Just a few months ago, Cyrus had said, yes, go and rebuild. Now, after 1 to 2 months, 2 to 3 months, in the third month, it's no longer possible. What happened? And so he fasted. And the angel Gabriel now begins to tell Daniel something very, very strange. And what we're about to talk about is also this strange, I guess you can say, the strange news that Gabriel is giving. And it is not something that we are familiar with. It is talking about the heavenlies, about angels. And so, what we are about to read do not have much details. We only have the high level. We have the gist of things. And so we will not be able to explain very much. We can infer a little bit here and there, but we are not told the details of exactly what is happening up there. So let's begin verse 13. He says, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was standing in my way for 21 days. Then behold, Michael or Mikael, one of the chief priests, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia." And so now we are going to discuss some of these things. And I'm trying to be very careful here because we are discussing things which we seldom talk about. We only know enough of the details only in these two verses. And so in this particular verse, it seems that there are princes or prince. So it says here prince. This word is Tsar. And this word prince, as we translate, it's a ruler, it's a noble. We have many ways of explaining this prince, but we do see this prince as an angel. There seems to be an angel for the kingdom of Persia. At this point in time, Cyrus is the king of Persia. But what happened is that there is a prince of the kingdom of Persia. And we say that it's an angel. So if you see by person, we have Cyrus, and he is the king of Persia. Now we are told that there is such a thing called an angel, a chief, and he is representing the kingdom of Persia. That's how we read this. He is not looking after the king of Persia, he is looking after the kingdom of Persia. It seems that there is an angel who takes charge of the kingdom of Persia. And in so doing, he was, well, the word here says that he was opposed me. It says here, standing in the way or in my way. And this would be opposing. I think that would be a good word. He was opposing what I needed to do. And the suggestion was the opposition is to stop the rebuild. That was what this particular angel was trying to do, was to encourage the strength of the kingdom of Persia. And then it says here, it was for 21 days, and it's just exactly the same time as the morning of Daniel. And after 21 days, Gabriel showed up, but he was held back. And so he's now describing what really did happen. And so while Gabriel was contending with this angel or this chief representing the kingdom of Persia, and it was for 21 days. So it's Gabriel versus the angel of the kingdom of Persia. We have another, well, we call it angel. And it says here he was uh one of the chief princes, one of the chief leaders, or one of the chief, uh I guess you can say one of the foremost angels. I think that is a good way of expressing it. One of the foremost angels. He came to help me. And then it says here, not for, but and then I had been, I had remained there, right? Remained there with the kings of Persia. So now we're not talking so much as the kings as in Cyrus, but we're talking about the aspect of what is happening in the, well, if you would like to call it the spiritual realm. You see, in the Hebrew text, we don't have much of these, what we call spiritual events. This is happening in the vision, of course, and of course, anything can happen in a vision. But Gabriel was describing there is this tussle, there is this contention between the chief angel that represents the kingdom of Persia. Then there are the other angels that represent the king of Persia. So it says here, kings of Persia. These are the other angels that is here together with this particular angel. It is not about Cyrus. It's about this bunch of angels who are there, and there is commotion. They have one track that they want to pursue, which is to push forward the interest of the kingdom of Persia. And Gabriel is trying to stop that because this move for the kingdom of Persia is halting the construction of the temple. And the one that can actually set this apart was Michael. And he was one of the foremost angels that can come in or step in place to resolve the argument. So it is in a poetic form, it is in the realm of the spiritual. And as I had mentioned, this is not common. This is probably the only time in the Hebrew Bible that talks about this little glimpse of what's up there, while we down here are looking at kings and kingdom in a physical way. In a spiritual way, there appears to be angels assigned to the kingdoms that we see. And how these things take place appears to be what is happening up there affecting what is happening down here. So we have the up and we have the down. We are in the down, and this to us is reality. And up is spirituality. Now, I must be careful talking about this because it is a very unusual passage, right? A very, very unusual passage. So, what we are now looking at is now verse 14. You take a look at verse 14. It says here, and then, and then I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the latter days, because the vision is about the days that is still in the future. Very seldom do you find the Hebrew language talk about the future, but this is one time in these three chapters. It is not yet happened. He has seen chapter 7, he has seen chapter 8, very terrified. And so in this case, Gabriel is going to explain to Daniel, who is standing there terrified, what is going to happen to your people, the Jewish people, in the latter days? And this what latter days is the end part of this epoch, because this vision is regarding that day, the days that is in the future. And all this is what he was terrified about in chapter 8. Now, in chapter 10, details are coming out. And these details will dovetail into what he had seen in chapter 8. It is now important for us to understand that while Daniel is struggling to look at this vision and he is so afraid, he is now being given a glimpse of the heavenlies, what we call the spiritual, and what the angels are doing there in a different dimension that affects life here on the earth as we know. And so, what we see and what is happening up there has a form of a relationship which we really cannot explain. That is also how the Jews begin to explain that the temple below that they see, we will see on the earth, has a corresponding counterpart that is up there in the heavens. And so Isaiah chapter 6, for example, reveals some of these ideas that what happens in the higher realm of the spirituality also affects the reality that we have today. And so chapter 10 here tends to coincide with how the Jews look at this reality that we have, that it's not the only reality. There is a corresponding spirituality that ties the two together, which we really can't explain because the Hebrew language doesn't allow us to do that. The Hebrew language and Hebrew people are fixated over what is concrete. What is abstract is now being given us a glimpse. Now we may ask, why can't we see all the things that's happening? Well, we can't, because that is not something that we all can see. And so it was shown to Daniel, and is told to Daniel some of the things that is going to happen, that is going to affect him and his people. So understand, in the Bible, whenever you see prophecies, whenever you see visions and dreams, it has to do with Israel. It has to do with the Jewish nation. Like here, it has to do with the Jews. Those who are going back, have gone back, and those who are still there. And so God wants to let them know what is really going to happen. Now, it is difficult for me to explain anymore, but suffice for us to say that this is the angelic expression, the angelic story, the angelic explanation of what is going to happen, not what is happening in the heavens. The angel Gabriel is not talking about the angels that represent the kingdom of Persia. The angel Gabriel is going to tell him what is going to affect the Jewish people. No, why? Remember what I said. In our realm, we are only concerned with what we can see, touch, feel, and experience. What is up there is a secret. It's a special realm which is not meant for us humans. And so in this case, Daniel was given a glimpse of what is up there and told a little bit, but that's all. Why are we not told more? Because it doesn't matter. All it does is to give us that there is something that's happening up there, And what is happening up there, it is better for us to know how it affects us down here. Because what is up there cannot be understood. But what is down here, then humans must understand. Daniel must understand and write it down. Now, that is what I am trying very hard to help us look at a very unusual text. We seldom get a glimpse of what is in the other dimensions. And now we are not to be preoccupied with that. All we need to know is something is happening up there with regards to kingdoms. Now, the last point I want to make to you is Gabriel came to tell Daniel, and the Jews look at this event and sees Michael, as the angel that represents the kingdom of Israel. Uh, and I think I should just leave it at that without having to say too much, because there isn't much that we can talk about. It's a different realm. We can't really fathom, but suffice for us to know that yes, there seems to be representation in the courts of God that represents kingdoms and how they are to engage in the heavenly realms and how it affects the earthly. Now, the mechanism we don't know. But what we do know is that whatever has happened up there, well, down below is what is going to be told to us. The events that will occur. Now, let me explain this. When the text says this, that the events of the latter days, the end part of this epoch, this will be the epoch of the 490 years. This is their latter days. It is not a latter days of 2,000 years down the road, but it is with regards to this coming next period, which today in Daniel's time is the Persian Empire. But what is going to come in the next period of time towards the end of the 490 years? And that's the epoch that we are talking about. So that is how Daniel would look at it, because in chapter 9, he is given 70 weeks of years. And here, in that 70 weeks of years, what is going to happen? And as things are unfolding, well, Gabriel is going to tell him. So we are going to spend a lot more time trying to understand what Gabriel is speaking to Daniel with regards to what things are going to happen here on earth. Gabriel is no longer trying to explain what is happening in the heavens. He merely mentioned that by saying a glimpse of the other world, if you want to call it that way, the other world, the heavenly realm, the other dimension where the angels are, and what might they be doing. And they are not singing, they are engaging in the affairs of kingdoms. And hence, the affairs of the kingdoms seems to have an effect on us today. And so in Daniel chapter 10, verse 14, it is about the end times of the epoch that would be the 490 years. And with this, we come to the end of our session, and we will continue in verse 15, and hopefully we can get to finish it next week.